guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a book called What Should Darla Do, written by Gamit and Adir Levy. This is a fictional, interactive children's book that allows a variety of impactful scenarios for children to experience based on the power to choose. In the overall progression of this book, it allows readers to make choices for Darla, the main character, to achieve 8 different endings depending on the choices that are made. As the book begins, Darla introduces herself and expresses her passion for space and her desire to become an astronaut. This character foundation runs as a theme through most of the storylines to the ending, but plays a secondary role in regards to plot progression. So, Darla is faced with good and bad choices throughout the book, and the reader has to decide how she's going to react. So there are always 2 choices presented, a positive choice and a negative choice. When the reader decides, they'll flip to an instructed page and the storyline will continue in a different direction than what the other choice would have provided. As the story goes on, Darla can make good choices, she can make bad choices, or she can make a combination of both. All choices in the story will make the story end in a different way, which allows this book to basically have 8 different stories in one book. Regardless of how Darla decides to act, the focal point of her day always wraps back around to the fact that she has the power to choose. Some examples of the power to choose would include like her first choice of the day. It sets Darla into motion into one path or another for the rest of the book. In the first choice, she goes to the kitchen table for breakfast and she wants to sit next to her little brother, but as she approaches the table, her older sister swoops in and steals her seat. Darla can decide if she wants to fight for the chair and try to push her sister off of it, or she can decide to sit on a different seat on a different part of the table and not fight. So both decisions spin the story off into different directions. If Darla chooses to sit at a different seat, no fighting occurs with her sister, and they both help clean up the table, and Darla ends up taking out the trash, which allows Darla to see her friend riding a scooter outside. This decision opens up the opportunity for Darla to enter a path of playing with her friends for the rest of the day. If Darla chooses to fight over the chair, she and her sister argue over who takes out the trash and several other things. This option keeps Darla inside the house, interacting at different times with her sister, which poses the issue of sharing and using things without permission. So this leads into my direct quote for the book. In this situation, Darla's sister tries to use Darla's baking set, but she did not ask for permission. When Darla chooses to demand that her sister give back the baking set, the girls begin to tug on it. They both fight over it, and it ultimately shatters into a bunch of pieces, and Darla becomes very upset. "You broke it!" I yell. "Nuh-uh, you did," she says. "Now I'll never be able to use it again." I grab Astronautica and rush to my room to cry. This situation is an escalation of epic proportions. It was a bad decision for her sister to use an item of Darla's without permission. It was a bad decision for Darla to demand the baking set back. And it was a bad decision for both of them to tug on it. Because of the succession of these bad decisions, Darla lost a play item that she really cared about, and she won't get it back because now it's broken. I like this, however, because through the pictures and the text, it conveys how bad decisions lead to unpleasant emotions and unpleasant consequences. So as far as age appropriateness, I would definitely say that this book is age appropriate. It's intended for the age range of readers between 5 years old up to about 8 or 9 years old. This is a time in children's lives when they are learning how to act appropriately and make decisions while understanding how those decisions affect themselves and other people around them. The power of choice is a great tool to teach children that their actions have consequences, which is clearly demonstrated when Darla's choices are made. In this book, it's full of teachable moments where the reader is able to reflect on why these situations are unfolding the way that they are. This book, while I overarchingly deem it age-appropriate, I think it's necessary for an adult to read it, at least for the younger kids, around 5 or 6 years old, because in some spots there are little paragraphs of text which younger readers may have a struggle with reading themselves. This also ties into the idea that there are some selective words that may be a little harder for younger children to pronounce on their own, such as the name of Darla's doll, Astronautica. Pros for this book, the first one I thought of was the pictures. The pictures are such a great asset to this book. They're completely encapsulating. There's so much detail that's expressed solely just through the pictures, where the text doesn't fully mention it or doesn't mention it at all. The colors are bright, they're watercolors, and the pictures contain items with words on them sometimes. So for example, in one of the endings of the book, there's a part where Darla and her sister are working together to launch Darla's rocket that she made. In the foreground of the picture, you can see a box labeled with baking soda, and then there's a bottle labeled with vinegar. The text never mentions these items specifically, but seeing these things can open up a door to a conversation that young children may never have had before, which includes the idea that adding these ingredients together can make an explosion that will allow a rocket to launch, or in a different aspect, make a volcano overflow with magma and lava. This in itself is exposure to scientific ideas, which isn't directly highlighted in the book, but it is clearly evident through the visual depiction of events. Another pro for this book is how it explores a growing range of emotions. The pictures help depict the expression of these emotions, and it makes it relatable to readers to identify how something is making Darla or the other people in the book feel. This book also, through the choices made, expressed the idea of fairness. Behind the idea of the power to choose is the underlining lesson that actions performed lead to fair or unfair outcomes. As far as cons go, there aren't many cons that I can think of besides the way that Darla and her sister act and interact with each other. Both of these girls are young and immature due to their age, so in some instances, regardless of how Darla chooses, her sister makes immature or inappropriate decisions that influence Darla. But this actually would fall under the realm of teachable moments for social emotional learning, so I'm actually not so sure it's so much of a con as it is just the characteristics of the girls. As far as classroom appropriate, I would absolutely say that this book is classroom appropriate. I would use it in my classroom. It's awesome because it would be used to engage readers to read this book over and over again to get all of the endings or to see how it plays out. But it also encourages readers to reflect on the to reflect and process the decisions that are made. This book would work really well with social emotional learning, SEL, because there are a myriad of different emotions expressed throughout this book, such as happiness, excitement, anger, frustration, sadness, and surprise. Allowing students to express and experience these emotions and work through them is very important to their social emotional development. So, seeing these emotions in a book and how they are dealt with is a good conduit to allow students to reflect on their own emotions and how they could and should handle their emotions. Again, this wraps back around to the power to choose, which is a great way to highlight the fact that the young people in my classroom, or any reader that picks up this book, has control over how they act, react, and interact. I would definitely use this book in my classroom, and I would probably use it in the first few weeks of school to introduce my first or second grade students to the idea that the way they choose to act in class, or anywhere else, directly affects them and the people around them. As far as activities go, I came up with a pretty interesting one which I think would be kind of fun. So, working in small groups or with partners, students would be given a scenario on a piece of paper or a note card. Together with their partners or group, the students would have to come up with a good decision or a bad decision that stems from the situation they were given. I would go around and check on each group to review the decisions that they came up with based on their unique situation. After both decisions are written on paper, I would then ask them to act out these decisions, which would include the use of imagination and different emotions. This would be fun to see the students convey emotions associated with the decisions that they're presenting. In their small group, they would present both decisions. Then, as a class, we could identify which decision was being highlighted, either the good one or bad one, and talk about things we noticed, such as identifying if it was a bad decision and how that made the students feel based on the emotions they conveyed. After the physical interpretation of decision making, I would have the students write a journal entry. Especially with older students, this would work well. I would have them make a journal entry and talk about what they think and feel of the book or the activity and what they learned from it. With younger children who have a harder time getting thoughts onto paper, I would just have them verbally tell me what they learned or express how it made them feel. Overall, I think that this book is a really good resource for teachers, especially when highlighting SEL, social emotional learning. But it's also just fun and interactive for readers, I would say of all ages, but especially for the age group that it's intended for. All right, thank you very much, and that's all for today. Bye, guys.